So let's begin by just settling in first, getting mind and body together. Consanta Sangarapshida Santama Karajabani Shuna Suso Natanga Saso Katelaman Maso Wada. Umichigin Kipojane to some Sidi Wingi Monia and Sanchakana Sunta Zepa. So in a Mesha Blaso what? I'm going to talk about precious human life this morning. As part of the four thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma. Or the four mind changes. So you can refer to earlier videos where I talk about the four mind changes together. I think I've also talked about each one like individually. But the four mind changes are also called the four thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma. So what that refers to is the fact that, even in the olden days in ancient India and Tibet, uh, the mind of practitioners was not always turned towards practice or turned towards, formal practice or informal practice. And so these teachings are meant to help us want to practice, help us understand why it's important to practice. Okay. So the first one is remembering we have a precious human life, and that's going to be the main thing we'll talk about this morning. The second is death and impermanence. The third is the law of cause and effect, otherwise known as karma. And the fourth is the suffering of, the suffering of cyclic existence, or otherwise called samsara. So these four thoughts are, as I said, meant to help us remember the importance of practicing. So the first one being precious human life. So in the Buddhist teachings, all life is considered precious, whether it's human, animals, and other forms of life within cyclic existence. It's all precious in the sense that it should be protected. Pretty much the worst thing we can do is to take life. So it's quite important. So that would mean that all human life then is also precious. So why are we making this differentiation of putting that word precious before human life? The reason for that is because it delineates a very specific set of circumstances that mean that we have a life that is inclined to practice, where we're able to practice. So we have all the conditions there what are called like the inner conditions and the outer conditions, which I'll go through in more detail. But we have all the conditions necessary for being able to practice. Um, so those conditions are called the 8 freedoms and 10 advantages. And then there's like 16, I don't think I have them listed. Oh yeah, there's also 16 auxiliary factors, okay? And then 8 incidental circumstances. So it's a list, Buddhists really like lists. So we'll go through this. So the 8 freedoms mean we're free from 8 situations, okay? And that is being born in uh, a realm that is not a human realm. So the hell realms, the hungry ghost realms, animal realms, and then the 2 so-called God realms and demigods. Those are the first 4. So we're born a human being. The next 4 are that we're not born in uncivilized lands. Okay. So what that means is like born in an area where there's no access, or it's like there's just a lot of war and fighting and kind of very rough conditions, let's say. Sometimes that's called the barbarian lands, which I find kind of funny, because India, of course, Buddhism started in India around 600 BCE, and when the teaching started to go to Tibet in, I don't remember when that was. I want to say the 5th or 6th century, maybe. Uh, the Indians were kind of freaking out about the Dharma being taken to the barbarians in Tibet. What? You're taking our precious Dharma, these, exquisite teachings to those nomadic people with red faces. What are you doing? You're going to ruin everything. And then, of course, the teachings flourished in Tibet for many centuries and eventually came to the West. And then the Tibetans had the exact same response, oh, you're taking our precious Dharma to those barbarians in the West. You're going to ruin everything. So, anyway, so the 6th point is incomplete faculties. So we're born free of having incomplete faculties. So, that means like we don't have uh, a physical handicap that might prevent us from practicing, physical or mental handicap that can prevent us from practicing. So it doesn't mean that if we are blind or deaf or something like that, we can't practice. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's a little more difficult, especially in those days, much more difficult when we did not have Braille and interpretive services and things like that. Now it's easier, but it's still a little, you can't deny it's a little more difficult. And then, of course, if we're not mentally capable of understanding things, then, we're going to be, again, very, very limited. The 7th is wrong views. So that means like usually they refer to that as views that say like killing is good or stealing is good or this kind of thing, but it can refer to not understanding or not accepting the law of cause and effect, past and future lives, etc. And then being free of being born in a time when a Buddha has not come. So for this one, we have to understand the time frame in Buddhist philosophy is very, very, very vast. So we're talking about eons upon eons and not just this particular cycle that we're in right now. So there are periods where Buddha does not appear at all um, uh, due to the lack of merit of the beings in the world at that time. So those are the 8 freedoms in brief. Then we have the 10 advantages. So the first 5 are called the 5 circumstantial advantages, and that is that a Buddha has come. So we have Buddha Shakyamuni, as I said, in around 600 BCE, has taught the Dharma, so gave teachings. So that refers to a situation where sometimes like beings have enough merit for a Buddha to appear, but not enough merit for the Buddha to actually give teaching. So in our case, we have both of those things. Um, uh, the teachings have survived. So we can still access the teachings of the Buddha. They still exist. They are unfortunately diminishing, largely due to the Chinese invasion of Tibet in the 50s, where they destroyed volumes upon volumes of teachings, libraries, monasteries, etc. And those escaping Tibet could only carry so much. Our own teachers, uh, Tugu Pema Wangya Rinpoche and Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche, their father, Kangya Rinpoche, pretty much just took all the books that he could possibly manage, and that was about all he took out of Tibet when he escaped Tibet. Um, so the teachings have survived, but we should note that they are diminishing. I remember in my second 3-year retreat, Tugu Rinpoche being almost to the point of tears, talking about all the teachings that that we do have that one can have access to, but they have not been translated into English or other Western languages. They just exist in Tibetan, and there's the number of translators is pretty small. So um, they're being lost, and we who only speak English or only speak French or whatever language we speak don't have access to those many volumes of teachings. So if you have the capacity to be a translator, please try to do that. It's quite important. There are followers of the teaching. So we can have a situation where Buddha has come, Buddha has taught, the teachings have survived, but nobody's really following those teachings anymore. They just exist in books and some library somewhere. So in our case, there's still those who are following the teachings. And then the fifth of these circumstantial is that there are favorable conditions for Dharma practice. So that means you know, like in China, for example, and in current day Tibet, can be really hard to do any practice because they're really repressed by the government. And in our case, we as people who live in the United States, um, we still have the capacity right now to be able to practice. But as we see, if we are paying any attention to the political landscape, that capacity is impermanent and it could change. Even in our lifetime, that could change if the United States becomes uh, an entirely Christian nationalist theocracy, then we may have to uh, practice in secret. Um, you don't know, and it sounds fanciful, but it is possible. So those are the 5 circumstantial or like outer, in a sense, advantages, and then there's 5 personal advantages. So that is to be born a human being. So as we said, this is really being born a human. So the 6 realms are what's called the hell realms, hot and cold hells. Maybe I'll go over samsara one of these days and talk about that in greater detail. Don't get too excited about that or worried about that. It's a more subtle idea than you might imagine at first glance. So don't freak out. Okay. And then there's the hungry ghost realm, which is a realm marked by a lot of suffering of hunger and thirst. And then there's the animal realm, which we see and are familiar with. And that includes the smallest insect to, I think the largest animal is a whale, to the largest whale, and everything in between. And then there's what's called the demigod or the jealous god realm, which is kind of a realm marked by like a lot of wealth, but a lot of fighting and war. And then there's the God realm, which is roughly analogous to the Christian idea of heaven, I guess, or like a paradise, right, where everything's very easy and nice, etc. So the human realm is kind of the Goldilocks, kind of the sweet spot for that, because we have enough suffering to start to ask questions, like why am I suffering? And why is this happening? And how do I get out of it? But enough, what's usually termed leisure, which means like enough enough time, enough time to study and practice, enough um, of a good situation where we can do those things. So, for example, like if we have so much suffering, like like let's say we're living in a war zone or something like this, we're not even going to think about practicing. We're just trying to survive. If, on the other hand, we have too much pleasure, like in the God realms, right, where they're just blissed out all the time, it doesn't occur to you to want to get out because you're having such a good time, right? So why would you think about that? So for the humans, it's good because there's, as I said, enough suffering that you start to ask questions and you kind of start to search for something, meaning, for understanding, and yet enough leisure to be able to practice. So human being, and then, pardon me, born in what they call a central land. So a central land is anywhere where we have access to. I'm so sorry, excuse me. I just had coffee before and it's affecting me. Um, so a central land is anywhere that we have access to the teachings. And, India was a central land and could probably still be considered that because you can certainly, especially with the Tibetan diaspora, you can still practice the Dharma there. But, Buddhism was almost entirely wiped out with the Islamic invasions coming over. So, and then Tibet, Buddhism flourished for, as I said before, centuries before the Chinese invasion. And honestly, I don't know if you could call Tibet a central land at this point. Not exactly sure how things exist there right now. I imagine not very good. Same thing with China. So now we can say that the West in general could be considered a central land if you have access to the teachings. Then the third there of the five personal is faculties intact. And as I was saying earlier, if we are, let's say, blind or deaf or something like that, or we can't speak, um, it's not, doesn't mean we can't achieve enlightenment. We certainly can. It's just an obstacle. So just makes it harder, like part of the practice is visualization, which you might be difficult. Even seeing sighted people, I've had a few people tell me over the years they have, I forgot what it's called, but there's a state, has a specific word, where people cannot visualize things. So, and then we want to say prayers, we want to say mantras. If we can't speak, that's going to be difficult, etc. So again, this is not something to get overly excited about. It's just a practical consideration. Then we have a lifestyle that is not harmful or wrong. That's the fourth of these five personal advantages. And that means, yeah, like we're not born into a family of thieves, for example, or we're not taught to, um, not care at all about others because we have more money than God, this kind of thing. We're not living this kind of lifestyle that harms others or is morally wrong. And the fifth is we have faith in the Dharma. So that means faith. You have to be careful with this word in Buddhism. It doesn't mean the same as it does in Christianity and possibly other faiths. It really, we should think more of it in terms of confidence. We have confidence that the Dharma is true, that it's worthwhile, that we can actually practice it. A practice will lead somewhere, etc. Okay, so those are the 10 advantages. Then we go to the 16 auxiliary factors. Okay, there's 8, and 8. I really want to do like I often talk about doing like a Jeopardy game with these things, to help us learn and remember, because there's so many lists, the two truths and the three jewels and the four noble truths and the five paths and the six paramitas, the seven factors of enlightenment, the noble eightfold path, the nine yanas, And the 10 advantages, that's just 10. And this one should be one taste. There you go. So anyway, the 16 auxiliary factors are divided into two groups of 8. The first 8 are called the 8 impossible states where mind cuts us off from the Dharma. So the first is having little renunciation. So this is, when we talk about renunciation, again, like there's really a handful of words, maybe more than a handful of words, but a kind of smallish set of words that are translated into English that don't necessarily have the same connotation when we use them in like our daily speech versus when we use them in regards to the Dharma. Okay, renunciation is one of those words. When we think about renunciation as Westerners in general, we tend to think of kind of uh, living the life of a renunciate, meaning like no material things and punishing the body and this renouncing wealth, this kind of thing. Doesn't really mean that in the Buddhist context, at least not from the Vajrayana point of view. We're really talking about not being seduced by cyclic existence, by thinking that we can find lasting happiness in regular worldly life without the Dharma. And this has been our mistake for eons upon eons, and we need to get over that. That's one understanding. The other is just, Tugru Rinpoche says that when we talk about renunciation, we're really talking about renouncing the causes of being in cyclic existence, which are the conflicting emotions like hatred, pride, jealousy, and so forth. These are the things that keep us wandering in samsara. The second is having no devotion. Not much to say about that. The third is caught in the bonds of worldly ties and cravings. So that's related to the first one that I said, where we get really caught up in getting more money, getting wealth, status, this kind of thing. And it's just essentially a waste of time. The fourth is having crude, degenerate behavior. Not much to say there. The fifth is never holding back from negative, harmful action. So essentially, like we just don't give a care, right? We're just gonna do whatever we want. We're gonna get revenge on people we don't like. We're gonna try to harm others if we feel that they have harmed us, and so forth. Okay. So the sixth is lacking the slightest real interest in the Dharma. And all of these, especially these, there's certain, well, let me go through them and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. So having no interest in the Dharma, essentially. The seventh is breaking all our vows. So we take vows as ordained people. We also take vows as lay people. There's, the 5 precepts, which are to refrain from taking life, refrain from taking what is not given, refrain from sexual misconduct, refrain from wrong speech, and refrain from intoxicants which cloud the mind. There's a lot to say about that I won't go into. And then the 8th here is our Samaya commitments are torn to shreds. So Samaya is this sacred bond that we have with our teacher, our Lama, Guru, whatever, and also with our fellow practitioners. So with the teacher, it's things like, if our teacher gives us particular practice to do, and we promise to do that practice, and then we just throw it out the window and we don't do it, it's breaking Samaya, things like that. So the 8 incidental circumstances are, the first is being misled by corrupting influences. So this is something that, can happen with surprising ease if we're not paying attention, right? We sort of, honestly, practicing the Dharma in the West is challenging. It's more challenging than it was in Tibet and in India at the time, certainly at the time of the Buddha. Okay. Why do I say that? In part because, as Songtsen Rinpoche has said in the past, there's so many more distractions now, right? We have TV, we have the computer, we have, social media, we have to work 80 hours a week, all that stuff, right? It's very easy to just get completely distracted. And the things that they don't tend to mention is the isolation that happens when we're trying to practice the Dharma in the West. Typically, we're not in like in Tibet, even if people were not practicing Buddhists, because there were Christians in Tibet, there were Muslims in Tibet, the society as a whole at least knew what you were doing and had some respect for what you were doing and had some at least basic understanding. Okay. In the West, it's not like that. People don't really know what we're doing. And we have, if we're lucky, we have some kind of spiritual community, either online or, you know, in person, where we can gather with others to practice and do retreat and things like that, receive teachings, etc. But just out in the street, there's so many more influences to not doing Dharma practice than there are to doing it. So it's challenging. So we can be misled easily, pretty easily. Having the five poisons raging inside. So the five poisons are greed, anger, ignorance, pride, and jealousy. So just being a mess of negative emotions. When negative karma overtakes us. So these freedoms and advantages that we've been going through, um, it to have all of these things together is extraordinarily rare. And pardon me. And the result of our own like positive karma, right? Our own virtue, right? The result of that is getting to have a life where we can practice, right? So sometimes the effects of our negative acts of the past will kind of overtake us, and then we can't practice anymore. Being distracted by laziness. So that is the fourth one of these second eight. And being distracted by laziness. I mean, when we talk about laziness, we're talking about just general laziness. We don't want to get out of bed. We want to spend hours and hours scrolling, playing games on our phone or playing video games, whatever. And we just, just don't feel like practicing sort of general, our usual understanding of laziness. There's also something, and I don't know what the word is in Tibetan, but it's translated as essentially active laziness. So active laziness is like we have set a time to practice and we are, sit down to practice and then we just think, oh, look at my carpet, it's really dirty. I need to vacuum, and we jump up and we start to vacuum. We're just avoiding practicing. It's still laziness, but it doesn't feel like laziness because we're doing something, but it is under the umbrella of laziness. The fifth is being enslaved. Uh, that might sound again something quite extreme, but you would be, I encourage you, if you are doubting being enslaved in our day, to Google that, because slavery unfortunately is alive and well, um, in a traditional sense, where people are forced to work for no pay and abused and so forth. So um, you can look that up for yourself if you want proof. But there's also like other ways of kind of being enslaved, in a sense, right? Having a partner that doesn't want us to practice, um, having a job that doesn't allow us any time to practice. You could, in a sense, consider in this category. The sixth is practicing out of fear. Um, I really don't know what this means. I can't really imagine practicing out of fear. Maybe it's um, fear of being born in the lower realms and we practice, but in my view, in my understanding anyway, it just seems like that's still practice. So not necessarily a bad thing. Anyway, so I won't talk about that. The seventh is merely pretending practice. Yeah, so that is something that happens, right? We can, even to ourselves, we can lie to ourselves, um, the kind of, pushing our mala or pulling our mala in this case, right? And Not really paying attention. No, not really paying attention to what we're supposed to be paying attention to when we practice. We might be planning dinner. We might even be looking at our phone. We might be having a conversation with someone and sort of turning them on at the same time, this kind of thing. Or we're just practicing, Jigme Khyentse says, sometimes we are practicing like we're paying our taxes, it's like no heart in our practice. And then the eighth is being chronically senseless and stupid. So I don't know. Okay, so those are the eight incidental circumstances. Let's see, is there more? No. Okay. So these eight freedoms, conditions of our precious human life, are divided typically, most frequently, eight freedoms, 10 advantages. Okay, and then there's these 16 that are added on. So of these, whatever the addition to that makes, 18 plus 16, you can do the math. There are some that are quote unquote permanent, like we are born a human being. Like that is not something that, as long as we're alive and we're a human being, we're a human being. We can't suddenly in this life become an animal or something else. Okay. Same with so all of the eight freedoms are essentially something that is present as long as we have a human life. So it's nothing we can really do about it at this point. Okay. Um, the uh, the five circumstantial, as far as the advantages are concerned, five circumstantial are these kind of five like outer things that again, not necessarily going to change as long as we have in this life, right? So Buddha's come, it's called the Dharma, teaches that survived, etc. The five personal advantages can change. Okay. Born a human being, no, it's not going to change. Born in the central land could actually change. We're born in let's take America as an example, but who knows? In our lifetime, that might change and we might no longer be able to really freely practice. Faculties intact, we're born with our faculties intact, but we could have an accident or something like that where, we go blind or something like that. It becomes more difficult. Lifestyle is not harmful or wrong, that can change. Having confidence in the Dharma can definitely change, right? And these 16 auxiliary factors can definitely change. Those are the most impermanent of this whole list. So we should check from time to time, do I still actually have all of the factors of what it means to have a precious human life? And for those things that we might be able to change, like not having confidence in the Dharma or breaking our vows, or being lazy, this kind of thing, like we can change those things back, right? So we should pay attention to those things. Okay. So that is a very, very, very brief explanation of what it means to have a precious human life. It is considered something extremely precious and extremely rare, and to be taken seriously and appreciated and used. You know, if we have all of these conditions together and we don't practice, it's like having a lottery ticket, and seeing, oh, I have the winning number on my lottery ticket, but I'm not going to bother to cash it in. Like we would never do that, right? So we should think about a precious human life in the same way. Okay, so let's do some practice. Let's do some meditation practice, okay? So if you're sitting on the floor, you just want to cross your legs in whatever way is comfortable for you. If you're sitting in a chair and you want your feet flat on the floor, according to your physical capabilities, all the other instructions are the same. So palms down, hands, palms down on the knees, palms up, resting one on top of the other in your lap, or with your fingers on top of each other and your thumbs touching like you're holding an egg. Arms are relaxed. Back is straight. That's the most important thing. Back of the neck is also straight. Chin's going to be tucked in a little bit. Shoulders should be back a little bit. So you do that however you like. I usually like to just roll my shoulders back one time and feel the chest open up. The mouth is closed but relaxed. Tongue resting on the roof of the mouth. Breathing through the nose. Ideally, the eyes are open, looking down in front of you a few feet with a relaxed lowered gaze. So this posture is the way that it is because it helps the mind in meditation. So what are we doing in the meditation? Well, first of all, we're bringing our awareness to the sensation of the breath coming in and out of the nose. So you just want to pay attention to the tip of your nostrils here. So take a moment and just notice that sensation first, and I'll continue the instructions. Okay. So the aim is to maintain continuous awareness of that sensation, letting the thoughts come and go on their own. So we're not trying to stop thinking. Okay. It's not really possible, especially at our level anyway. We're just trying to avoid getting caught up in those thoughts. Okay. We want to start to notice the ephemeral, impermanent, non-self nature of our thoughts so we can begin to attain some kind of freedom from being constantly caught up in every thought and emotion that passes through our mind. Okay. So we're going to just begin there, noticing the breath, trying to keep a relaxed, continuous awareness of the breath, letting the thoughts come and go. So please begin that now. Okay. Now you want to begin to count the breaths, counting either every in-breath or every out-breath for a total of 10 complete breaths. So counting the breaths helps us to realize more quickly when we've gotten distracted, because we'll have lost count, right? So that's how it helps. If you do find yourself distracted, as soon as you realize that, just simply non-judgmentally, in a very relaxed and easy manner, just bring the mind back to the breath, into the present moment, and begin again at 1. If you get to 10, just start again at 1. Please begin that now. One thing that's quite important to remember is to have this very kind of relaxed attitude. Um, for our posture, we want to maintain the posture, but without tension. So just enough tension to maintain the posture, to not completely crumple into a heap, but to not be overly tense. Same thing with the mind. We want to try to keep that continuous awareness of the breath, but without squeezing on the breath or grasping after the breath. Just relaxed, always there. We're also aware of our environment in general, but we're kind of mainly focused on the breath. When we get distracted, again, no tension, just, oh, I got distracted. And you bring the mind back. That's why we're practicing. That's the whole point of this practice, is to become familiar with the sensation. Now, this is my mind when it is concentrated and aware. This is my mind when distraction. Here's me bringing my mind back from distraction. Okay. So please continue your practice. Okay, so now we're going to say the closing prayers. There's a link below where you can download them, but I will share my screen anyway. But I encourage you to download them for yourself. Let's see, here we go. We are going to begin with saying the long life prayer, our teachers, and also teachers in general. You can read them in English on your own. We're just going to say them in Tibetan. Kanri wawe kowe shinkan su pandan de wa manu chuene chenre sion tenzin gyam su yi sape gyu ga ba tu tengyu shi. Then the one below, the Jigme Kitsur Krishan. Swasti Jigme Kempe Kalo Yamparu Kunkap Sechen Sesen Puntawa Nidu Dunsanam Keno Bucho Seche Yawe Shagin Tasu So Swasti Sela Gamsu Chinab Chinjune Nunsin Dakse Gyutu Pemawam Samsung Nadre Gaboja Tene Nakchandan de Shaitan Tage Sho Lama Gungam Sampo Sowadet Sutu Kutse Ringwa Sowadet Tine Dashinge Pa Sowadet Lama Dandre Wame Pa Chingi Lo. Now, go on to the next page. In this prayer here, we say one thing from Songtsen. Remaining three, we say just in English, and then we say the 100-syllable mantra. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of cyclic existence, may I free all beings. Sonandi tamche zepani, tobne nyeke dranam panche shing, kegana chi balon chukai. Sipe sole droa sho. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it does not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Ever absorbed in the display of divine forms and primordial awareness, appearance, sound, perception in the state of divinities, mantras, and dharmakaya, may I, inseparable from the practice of the profound and secret great yoga, attain within the essence of mind the state of one taste. Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manubalaya Vajra Sattva Tanupa Tishtadrito Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Subhukayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sawa Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sawa Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuru Ha 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 Bhagavan Savatata Vajrama Me Munsa Vajripa Maha Samaya Sattva. So before I let you go, I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much for joining us this morning, or whenever you watch the video. And I also want to mention that Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche, who's one of our main teachers, will be giving some transmissions in the starting tomorrow morning, Eastern Standard Time. We don't know for how long. If you are interested in that, please send us an email. I believe you can find our email address in the description box. If not, you can find it on our website, which is certainly listed there. Yes. So the website link is there. It's buddhistcleveland.org. So our email address is there, info@sgb.org. buddhistnuncc.org. Email us and we can share that information with you if you're interested. We also will be coming up on the very special day this coming Wednesday. It's called Sagadawa Duchen. It's one of 4 big days in the lunar year where the effects of our positive and negative actions are multiplied many millions of times. So we will be doing the Buddha sadhana and another practice on that day, starting at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. If you are not getting the newsletter, please sign up for that. We're also coming up on our summer break, which begins on Sunday, June 22nd and goes through Sunday, July 20th. During that time, we will not be having meditation, but we will still be doing the Buddha days. And so if you have permission to join that. Next Saturday, we will, have meditation live on YouTube as usual, but also in person at the Lakewood Public Library on Detroit. I do want to say, please, if you can, it would be wonderful if you could make a donation. Even better if you could become a member. We do need money to survive as an organization and to continue to lead meditation, teach classes, and things like that. Unfortunately, money is required. So to donate would be a really wonderful and meritorious act, and very, very much appreciated by myself personally and by Songtsen Gampo as an organization. Again, links for all of that is in the description box below. All right, so thank you again, and please join us again. Okay, bye-bye. Have a great day.